every day we're in this hustle kind of moment of just, you forget to like look side to side and see who's running with you.
Yes.
And there was this moment of, I feel like I was so focused on where we're going, what's the direction, and called this directions for dance, when the direction has always been clear. It's literally looking with the people we're running with.
Hello and welcome to the Art Versations podcast, a meditative conversation about the artistic process. Thank you for clicking on this show and for taking an interest in the arts. I'm your host, Brie, like the cheese, and I appreciate your ears. As the year wraps up soon, there is time for reflecting on the many joys and challenges we faced as an arts community this past year. This episode dives specifically into the dance community. I was fortunate enough to partner with Mississauga-based dance theater company Frog in Hand for this special roundtable. If you're a longtime listener, you'll have heard from Frog in Hand artists on the podcast before, and it was a pleasure to connect with Artistic Director Colleen Snell again as a part of the launch of their new home, the Art Shelter. Directions for Dance was a series of 5 pay-when-you-can classes, followed by discussion sessions, led by a panel of 5 professional dance artists with roots and/or practices in Mississauga. 3 classes were held in downtown Toronto at the Fifth Dance, co-founded by Sarahí Cárdenas, another past guest, and 2 classes were hosted at the Art Shelter in Mississauga. Throughout the roundtable, you'll hear from Colleen, Sarahí, as well as Candace Kumar, Clarke Blair, and Abby Silvera. Be sure to keep listening after the episode finishes to hear audio clips from the Art Shelter's opening that happened back in November. You'll hear a piece from the Eagle Spirits of the Great Waters, led by Barry Gilbert. The Eagle Spirits are a non-for-profit group of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people celebrating and creating space for Indigenous art and culture along the north shores of Lake Ontario. More information about their work can be found in the episode description. And then to finish off, you'll hear a short clip from CALLAHAN Connor's improvised set. And the Art Shelter's Arts Activation Coordinator, MANDY MACLEAN, officially opens the dome. Let's find a direction for dance together. Sit at the table with us. Here is an hour with Frog in Hand. I just want to say, before we jump into like all of the heady, brainy stuff, like just how wonderful it is to gather and let the joy and the connection be what drives us in this moment. It's really important that we have conversations from different and allow different people to be in the conversation. So thank you all for being here and for your time. Colleen, I'm going to send it over to you to explain how you got all of these people in this room and where we are.
Oh my gosh. So we are in the Art Shelter, which is out in Mississauga. It is a bit tricky to find. Google Maps has a tendency to send people in odd directions, but technically speaking, we are in Mississauga at the corner of Hydro Road and Rangeview, in a field in a geodesic dome. That is why there's a bit of maybe an echo that listeners are picking up on, because the acoustics in here are quite fascinating and the sound bounces all over. Mm-hmm. And I am here with some amazing dance artists. We've all been connected through the dance community. I got a City of Mississauga project grant a little while back, and the goal of that project was to make connections and strengthen the dance community, and to do that not only through taking class together and training together, but also through conversations, so we could have almost a practice as research kind of experience where we have a dialogue that's both verbal and nonverbal, and we get a chance to just experience each other's work. And we're just really excited to be partnering the Fifth for dance. So we had 3 classes in Toronto, and today, on this day, we had our first ever classes in the Dome. And it was just so joyful.
It was filled with circular joy, 3-dimensional joy almost.
Everybody say joy. Hi everyone, my name is Sarahí and I am the co-founder and director of The Fifth Dance. We are in Toronto in the corner of Sherbourne and Adelaide. We are also a little bit hard to find, but once you get there the first time, you're good.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here again.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Candace Kumar. I'm a cultural dance artist here in Mississauga. I specialize in Filipino folk dance. I've been learning and practicing diverse Filipino dance forms for the past 17 years, and I specialize in dance forms from the very south of Philippines.
So exciting to meet you and to have connected with you this week.
My name's Clarke Blair. I am a contemporary dance theater artist based in Toronto primarily, but I've had the lovely pleasure of working with Frog in Hand for about 6 years. So also, getting intimately familiar with Mississauga and specifically the lovely, lovely Port Credit area. Yeah, and that's what brings me here.
Thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you for having me.
And for starting off the week on such a high. Your class was the first one, and I was just so launched into this week because of your wonderful facilitation.
Thank you. I feel like a lot of through lines in the classes, but we'll get to that later.
I'm Abby Silvera. I'm a dance artist, theater artist, musician, originally from Vancouver, BC, and now I live and work in Toronto and also Mississauga, thanks to Frog in Hand, who I've only been working with for a year.
What?
Yes!
No.
Yes, but it feels like forever, in the best way.
Seriously?
Yeah.
At least 2 years.
2022.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We became family very fast.
Wow, that's wild. I'm gonna have to look at my notes on that. That doesn't feel real.
Maybe a year and a half.
We'll give you that half. So these are all the people speaking, but there are also some other folks in the space if they want to make themselves known with some noise.
Shout out. Wow. Our live studio audience. We have some wonderful folks in the room. When I point at you, could you just shout your name?
Jem, Andrew,
Mandy.
Jessica.
And all of these folks are on the they're part of the Frog in Hand family now, and they are collaborators and they're folks who have been with us for a few of the classes this week, or supporting in other ways, like administrative ways and so on.
I think a key word for me this week has been community. There's so many people involved in making this wonderful art shelter that we're in, as well as contributing to the conversation around where dance is heading, which direction it's going in. And I have felt personally so fueled by that sense of community. That was one of the words that struck me as an important part of this week. What are some other words that we threw into the space at the beginning on Monday?
I had one which was sustainability, and I was thinking of the different interpretations of that word as a dancer, wanting to practice in a way that'll increase the longevity of your career and your body, but also practicing in a way that's sustainable for the environment, which is, this art shelter is off-grid and solar powered and has a very minimal footprint and warmed by the sun. So that is an idea as well as sustainability, but also we were practicing and working in ways that were not sustainable prior to the pandemic. So it's trying to move forward and actually put into action and embody the change that we wanted to see and that we had already felt, which was also being, visible to our community and accountable to them.
Sarahí, is there anything that you want to add about what the Fifth can do in that sense?
Yeah, it makes me think. I feel like I wasn't a part of the classes, sadly, but I feel like when you say 3 words, I thought of curiosity. Like I'm curious how the Fifth can sustain and can provide for the dance community, not only in Toronto now, but also in Mississauga and anywhere else really. So I am just very curious, and I want to learn more on how can we support.
I think I had the word connection at the start of this, and I feel like that has manifested itself in many different ways throughout the week, like the literal connection of humans either forging deeper connections or like making new ones was very evident this week because we were working together so often. You could feel that deepening. Like that doesn't often happen unless you're in university.
Right.
You're not dancing with the same group of people 5 times in a week, right? So that was really special. And then also the connection of cities in Toronto to Mississauga, bringing those together, Toronto artists, Mississauga artists, literally where we were dancing, felt really special to me that this practice kind of lives in 2 places.
For me, a word that stood out was networks, because a lot of people brought in their own networks and own circles of people in their community within the class. So I met more people, I think, this week than I have in like the past month. So that was really cool just to see what people are bringing in and who people are bringing in, because they were people that I probably wouldn't have crossed paths with.
It's kind of like tree branches,
Yeah.
roots growing out into more communities.
Yeah.
And I think also on both of those points, it's so interesting to get to, dance and take class with the same group of people, but then also to meet people as facilitators as well, and like get an insight into your practice or your curiosity right now on more than just like a conversational level, like meeting minds and bodies. And for a few of you, this is the first time I've ever been in a class facilitated by you before. And it's really delightful to witness the generosity and also the like facilitator Sona little hat that we all put on I just think is so delightful and is like another brilliant way to get to know people.
Yeah, and there's a way in which I think we found a passing on of that facilitation to be really smooth and easy and allowed for like so many different ideas to be thrown into the space, and then also the ideas to be connected. Or that they were the same ideas in some way. That was like a really wonderful finding for me. We were brought together because of Colleen, obviously, but to be able to like cross-pollinate those communities, Mississauga, Toronto, the 5th, Art Shelter / Frog in Hand. And there's an overarching question about how those communities can be visible to each other and other communities to be visible to each other. Colleen, maybe you can speak on the overall goal that you wanted to find from this week, even if it hasn't been answered yet.
I think it has, and I think it's very nearly it's almost a facepalm moment for me because sometimes when you're like running a race, you're trying so hard not to just even get to the end, in our case, like to just keep going, because it feels like the race that we're in is, being a dance artist in the city, and every day we're in this hustle kind of moment of just, you forget to like look side to side and see who's running with you.
Yes.
And there was this moment of, I feel like I was so focused on where we're going, what's the direction, and called this directions for dance, when the direction has always been clear. It's literally looking with the people we're running with. At the beginning of the week, I had this moment of being, essentially, I was very concerned that I didn't know a lot of other dance artists, specifically in Mississauga, or people who would be interested in coming to the Art Shelter to take a class or participate in any kind of event out here. Out here feeling like, it's literally steps away from Long Branch. And it still feels like it's hard sometimes to get people to make that trip. So I was holding that concern about, we've just built this space, is anyone going to kind of come to the party? Or are we going to be kind of sad, like doing things out here that don't bring people together? Because we built it not only for Frog in Hand to have a home, but also to create creative community and to support arts infrastructure. So for me, I had this moment at the beginning of the week of kind of, is there anyone out there? Like, are there any other dance artists practicing in Mississauga, and how can we engage with them? And of course, the answer is yes, and there are many of them, and we just need to find ways of seeing each other. And it's obvious to me now, like, of course there are. But what is not always obvious is, Candace talked a lot about opening up the different kinds of communities to make them visible to each other. And that can be about finding ways to bring us together. It can also be about perhaps stepping outside of the type of dance that you practice And that's now become, for me, the curiosity that I'm holding as we move forward together is like, yeah, finding the people who are with you on the journey already, who you just maybe didn't remember were like right beside you. Right?
Yeah.
Because it is that person, maybe you're going to a ballet bar, it's like the person literally right in front of you is on that journey with you, but how do we connect with that person if it's like a drop-in class, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and each class was followed by some conversation to be able to start that conversation and to allow people who are taking class to sit in with us. And I think we found a lot of different opinions about the direction of dance. We're all very similar. There was an effect of we want to be able to see each other, like Candace was saying, or that we want to gather. We want to gather together. Clarke, another thing that was really interesting that you brought up, the word of retention has stood out to me. Maybe you can speak a little bit about how that came to you.
I'm trying to remember the specific context that I said that in, because I feel like it's something that I think about a lot, especially in the context of, I guess it came out of thinking about like getting non-dancers involved or aware of dance and what we've got going on, whether that be coming to take a class and try movement, whether that be taking a risk coming to a show. I mean, taking a risk is so sad, but sometimes it really is taking a risk to go see a show. But if there was more awareness of what dance is on a more public level, then it maybe wouldn't be such a risk. And I guess that comes back to this idea of retention. It's like, yes, we want people to come into the room, but we also want them to come back. And so how do we, I guess, make people feel seen or comfortable with their discomfort so that they're not having a weird experience and then being like, never doing that again. And I think also in the context of this beautiful dome is, I think people can sometimes affectionately be little babies about making a trek out to Mississauga.
That'll be me. But after this week, I'm like, oh, it's not that bad.
It's not that bad.
It's not that bad at all.
And now you've witnessed this beautiful space, and we are retaining you. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think this space is so stunning that even just by being here one time, you're like, I need to come back. This space is stunning.
I think it's very interesting that we're speaking about these directions of dance and how Colleen felt at the beginning of the week, and then relating it to one of the exercises that we did in Colleen's class today about, are you either following the grid or are you kind of like going on a little bit side path of the grid? And I think that, I don't know, that means something that feels interesting. How can we bridge that connection? Perhaps we have a group of dancers in every Go Train station, like doing like the non-dancer class, and like go that way to go to the art shelter, and then go that way to go to the fifth or something. I don't know,
Brilliant.
like a flash mob thing. I don't know. Please go on, continue.
That like idea of traveling, like going the other way, like as a Mississauga-based dance artist, I would go on like bus, subway, bus, streetcar, just to go and take classes at like City Dance Corps. And like it was like thoughtless, like I had to do it. There was no other way, especially when I didn't drive before. It was so much effort, and like there's so much like going this way, but how do we get that like reciprocated back our direction?
I remember, Colleen, one time you said, like, I transited into Toronto every single goddamn day. You people can come back out here. And I'm like, actually, that's true.
Yeah.
That's so immensely true. And I think about it all the time.
It will only do good to be able to see each other, like to be able to cross those communities. It's not going to do any harm, right? But I think it's always kind of forgotten because Toronto is a bit self-centered.
Toronto itself is so big. Like,
Right.
it's shorter for me to get here than it is for me to get to the East End. Like, just because it's a different city doesn't
It's
mean
so
it's
real.
far.
Yeah.
You know what they say? It takes an hour to go anywhere in Toronto.
Yeah.
So you might as well go transit for an hour and come to a dome.
Yes.
You heard it here first.
I'm going to throw out a big question, and whoever wants to catch it. Is the dance community visible to the mainstream non-dancer, non-artist audience?
No. Expand. I guess my train of thought for that was immediately, I'm thinking about, and I think I mentioned this in a previous conversation, how like ballet corps is so popular right now, and people are starting to take ballet classes for like aesthetic reasons, which I love. I have to say, love that. But also, like, are those people engaging with the wider community? Absolutely not. Also, I thought about how I saw the most recent Magic Mike movie, and I was like, oh my God, is that what people think of us? It was not good. It was like ego death in the theater. But there's even thinking of like what representation in media is that people are consuming, I don't think there's anything that's very accurate, I guess, to what I feel like our dance and arts community is, but also like even the techniques that are seen, like maybe we get a ballet TV show or we get like commercial dance in Schmigadoon, which are also fair, but I'm like, there's so much more nuance than what is I think publicly known.
Yeah.
Yes.
For me, like, I have a sister, and she's part of this community, and she's not a professional dancer, but she's like always been interested in the arts and in dance and taking class and in community events, and she's always going out to theater and comic events and different types of art events. But like, even she has a sister who dances, but she still can't see dance unless it's through me, and she was dancing before I was, and yeah, she was mentioning that it's less visible for her as a community member than the other types of arts that she engages in.
I feel like also in Toronto, and I guess maybe Mississauga a little bit, maybe this is like an Ontario / outside of Quebec problem. I feel like Quebec is really, dance, especially contemporary dance, feels a lot more like culturally relevant, like even to the extent that you will see like a billboard for FTA Festival where like you're walking down the street, versus I guess with the exception of maybe Fall for Dance North, we don't really see a lot of advertisement for dance in public spaces. So even like people's ability, if you don't have an in, if you don't know somebody, even if you do know somebody, you're probably skipping through an Instagram story unless they're strong arming you into an audience. Like, how do you bring people in? And then also again, when it's like a risk, quote unquote, I'm air quoting, to go see a dance show, you're like, well, I'll go see a comedy show because I know at least I'll laugh, even if I don't like some of the jokes.
I wonder if it has to do with the fact that perhaps people who don't do dance for a living, the concept of moving your body comes more into the working out or taking a yoga class or taking a Pilates class, but the thought of dancing doesn't cross their mind somehow. I don't know. Perhaps like dancing is something that we used to do as kids, and it was silly and it was all fun, but then at some point somebody was like, no, that's not it. And I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like there's a level of technique with dance that might feel like very inaccessible to people who haven't like grown up with it, because I feel like you can go to a gym, you can like lift a weight, right? Like that is easier than running into a ballet class and being like, there's so many names in French and like I have to turn out and like use muscles I've never used. Like, I feel like a lot of people maybe are put off by that and don't even try or don't know what classes to start with.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of people may think dance is really scary if you're not in it, and whenever I invite people to my dance events, they always ask me, do I have to dance? And I'm like, I'll either say no or be like, yeah, but it's like this level of participation, and then they're like, okay, and then at the end they'll be like, okay, that wasn't that bad.
So there is that realization, like, oh, I can move for joy, for pleasure.
Yeah, so many, whenever I invite people to my events, they're so like relieved and kind of shocked that, oh, that was it, I could do that, and I can do that again.
Incredible.
I have that thought as well. And it's kind of fundamental. It's an interesting and tricky thing to try to think about all the things that I don't know about right now, because I don't know about them. And it's really interesting that you don't know to seek it out if you literally don't know about it. And sometimes I think that one of the reasons the dance and sometimes the arts are not visible is because they're not part of the fabric of an everyday experience for people. And what that means is that it's not a question of which class do I take. It's like they literally don't have something like dance part of their day-to-day. Like, I can turn on the radio and hear music, but dance is just not there. The amount of work we have to do to advocate for it is so large. It's so fundamental, but it's so funny because people have bodies and we all move and we all express ourselves through our bodies every day. So while this is the most fundamental medium, in my opinion, to being human, because it's about touch, it's about expressiveness, it's about nonverbal experience. Like, we can move and in some ways we can dance before we can even speak, and yet we forget that experience underpins everything. Like, think of how important touch is to our experience and our sense of our own self. Like, it's huge, but we take that for granted, and as a society, you can't be like, which class do I want to take? It's literally like, well, you have to explain from the beginning. You have a body, and when you move, it can feel amazing. Yeah. And when you watch other people move, it can feel amazing. And it's hard, I think, for me personally, because that was never a discovery that I had to make. It was always there. So how do we share that? Because I've had experiences with lots of different movers where I've seen them discover this, and it's the greatest gift you can imagine. The greatest gift to me, when I get to see them discover for themselves whatever that joy is, how radical the joy can be when it spreads, then it becomes more visible because people have experienced it for themselves. But before then, it's like really difficult to advocate. And that's why the dome is transparent that's something I'm excited about, because people will literally look in on all sides and be able to see us moving, and that might make them want to participate somehow.
We've had a couple people today.
Even today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. The visibility or the transparency of dance as a practice, of movement as a practice, again, can only do good. It can only connect us and bring us more into our bodies. I think a lot about people who work from home, or people who have jobs where they sit all day, or they sit on the subway to get to their sitting job. I read somewhere online that like sitting is like one of the most detrimental parts of our society right now. That it can bring us so much more harm than already is inside of our bodies. Yeah, so echoing everything that everyone has just said.
I'm like, I want to stand up right now, actually.
Yeah, right?
Everybody stand up listening at home.
Well, we did just spend like 4 hours moving today. You deserve to sit.
I guess my only other thought from this is like, I feel like there is this movement, and this is definitely a little bit of like social media bubble, but mindfulness, self-care, like people doing the journaling, the mindfulness meditation, I feel like so much of it is just like millimeters away from movement and like somatic practice or like, and it's almost becoming trendy in a way where I see people are like, oh, this is something I can do, but I don't know where to look. Or I guess I just have curiosity about like, yeah, as people, no matter what thread brings them into the awareness of the possibility of dance or movement, I'm like, how can we as a community also be reaching back in the opposite way to be like, yeah, here actually is something that is a beginner class or is an open level thing that you can come to.
That was a theme this week, was what does it mean to have a truly beginner class?
Yeah, that's really stuck with me. And this, Candace, I think, brought this up, but like the thing of like our classes are not actually truly beginner, and because we don't have any real beginner classes, but we also have a lack of like real intermediate or real professional training, we're all congregating at this one level that is frustrating for everyone involved.
It keeps people out, even professional dancers. Yeah. That makes me think a little bit about, because I don't know what Mississauga offers in terms of classes. I'm not well versed to that, so I want to hear from those who are based here. But Toronto, I think, in terms of the Fifth has absolute beginner classes and beginner classes, and I think that's a really like interesting correlation that you've titled those classes very differently.
Yes, I will have to say in all transparency, I personally, me, Sarahí, I am famous for not sticking to the level that I'm supposed to teach. However, it's not my fault. It's they else's fault because they are so good, and then it makes me excited, and then I want to push more. But I think it's important to have the people. Sorry, I have one of my students is here, and he's agreeing,
Giggling in the background.
And nodding.
Thank you, Jen. But I feel like it is important for people to hear that there are no expectations of you to know anything whatsoever about a place that you're about to enter, infiltrate, get started with. So the absolute beginner. And also, honestly, sometimes I feel like there was a word or a descriptor that will be like even more clear, you know? But I don't know. I don't speak English.
It also, I'm just making this connection, but I taught a bunch of movement classes for the Sweet Action Theater Company. They're like a wonderful clown company, or space that does a bunch of clown work. And
In Mississauga?
No, sorry, in Toronto. But I taught classes for them, and I very intentionally didn't like advertise it widely, because I knew that if and this comes back to network, I knew that if I advertised it, then a bunch of dancers would show up, and it would change the vibe of the room to make it more, or just the fear or the implicit rules that come in with having dancers in the space versus other movers or actors or clowns. It becomes a very different vibe, and I very intentionally did not advertise widely because I wanted it to be for their community to meet their needs and desires.
And that was an active choice that you made, even though you knew that you may get less people in your room or less money, or, you know, like...
But then also the thing, too, is like, well, if we want to expand community, then should we not be cross-pollinating? But then what happens when we cross-pollinate? Spiral.
Yeah, well, I always encourage, like, even, for example, our absolute beginner dancers, at some point we had one of them that the only time that they could take class was the inter-advanced class. And I was like, you know what? Just come. Like, you may be able to do a tendu and a plie and that's it, but also it's kind of like a scene into the future of what could happen later on. And the same, I feel like it should be true. Like, we as professional dancers or people who move for a living, like, it's not a bad thing to go to an absolute beginner class, you know, like, of anything, like whether that is our medium or somebody else's medium, like, I think it would be very beneficial, you know. Yeah.
So are professional dance level people, are they welcome in absolute beginner classes?
100%. People do ask me like, well, then I'm gonna scare them off because I kind of know what I'm doing. I'm like, it's okay. And we have that to happen. Some more like intermediate dancers come to an absolute beginner, but if anything, it serves me as a teacher to be like, oh, this is what it's going to look like in the future, you know? So, I don't know, just trying to make it accessible. But yes, you are always welcome.
And maybe this comes back to retention, because if you're fostering a community where people at whatever level they feel like they're at, whether they're like, this is my first time here, or this, I am absolute beginner, but I'm confident in myself as an absolute beginner. If somebody who's intermediate and advanced is in the room with me, I still know that like I'm welcome and I can get what I want out of this. And it's like fostering spaces that give people that confidence in themselves so that they know that they can return and get what they want out of it.
Safety. Because it's a really vulnerable thing. Dancing as a professional dancer, like, it's very vulnerable. I can't even imagine, like, because like you said, Colleen, we never had to go through that thing of being like, dance is something I can do, and how is that scary, and like, how do I do that in front of people? Like, I just started dancing when I was 4, so I don't remember how that felt like. It was probably fun. Yeah, so I think it's really important to create that sense of safety of like, you are welcome here, no matter what, no matter how many people are in the room that like maybe have more experience than you, like, we're all here to do the same thing.
Oh my God. And speaking specifically to contemporary dance, it's a form that I love and is so beautiful, and it's so distinctive depending on the choreographer who's approaching it. But it takes itself very seriously. And even for me, that can turn me away because I'm like, I don't really, want to get that conceptual or, And I think there is some important work that is being done and needs to be done, but equally we need to push back against some of the serious and overly conceptual and offer alternatives to that, because, and I'm talking about classes, I'm talking about performance, and this is one of the reasons that we do clown a lot. Like, I bring Andrew over to teach clown at Frog in Hand because it starts us off with a sense of joy, and from there we can, actually revel in making mistakes and have that be a wonderful sense of discovery and something that is a gift, and I think that is, again, another reason, specifically speaking to contemporary dance, as to why it can put a barrier up. Because I remember when I was little and didn't do the contemporary dance yet, some of the first contemporary dances I saw, I was like literally afraid of them. I had no idea what was going on, and I was like, I'm afraid of this. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and then there's that question of like, why are we doing it then?
Yeah.
Performance, I guess specifically, is about connecting with an audience, connecting with people, sharing ideas, and if that audience isn't able to connect with it, well then it's masturbation. Like, it's like literally so self-centered. Mm-hmm. And so the elitism that I find within contemporary dance
and ballet.
Oh yeah,
we can go there.
The elephant in the room.
So real. Those two styles, for some reason, I think in my personal experience, have gone so abstract that my friends who are non-artists don't want to come, can't pay for it, and when they do come, they don't have a filter in which to talk about it. I'm going to transition into another question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
What do we need less of?
There you go. There's a couple of things that we just said.
Preciousness. I'm not going to elaborate on that.
You don't know.
I think we need less perfection.
Yeah.
Like, a lot less perfection. Because it freezes us. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't allow us to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somebody in one of the previous conversations said something about like there's more ways to get people to a professional level than just through force.
Vivian spoke about this.
Yeah, the perfection, and like I love technique. I think it is beautiful. I think it's important. I think it's historically relevant, it's culturally relevant, but also when we get into these conversations of perfection, I think you were saying this, Colleen, it's like this is where, especially in Eurocentric forums, the white supremacy like rears its head. And so how are the ways that we can get people to professional level, also whatever that means, without like shoving them into the tiny trauma box of perfectionism?
I think we need less judging of others and oneself, right? And I think it's tied to perfectionism, right? Because if you are just like judging yourself, oh, I'm not good enough for this class or that class, then you'll never try the class, and that prevents us from many things.
Less isolation, less bubbles. I just want to like pop every bubble. Like, a lot of people ask me, because I tried a lot of different cultural dance styles aside of my own, and a lot of people ask me like, oh, how do you do that, or like, where do you go for that? I was like, I just go. Mm-hmm. And that's just part of popping these bubbles.
Thinking about like perfection too, and this space again, something I love so much is the lack of mirrors.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you were going to say it's imperfect. Because it is cold, and it has, we're working on it.
Well, that also, there's something really beautiful about showing up and being affected by the space, and you never know exactly what it's going to be like. That's what the typical dance studio, very different. Yeah, and there's no mirrors and no front. It's a circle, and there's no kind of sense of like, I have to be facing this way, I have to be looking at myself. Like, it dismantles all of that we find in usual dance spaces. So I think the art shelter is a very good place to practice failing.
And I think everything is a matter of perspective, because when you started that sentence, I thought you were going to say that this place is perfect. Because Colleen was telling us how everything had to be like perfectly aligned in order to make the dome. And I think it's perfect. Like, in essence, it has to be perfect, or otherwise it will collapse on us.
Right.
So it's both perfect and imperfect.
It's sheltering us with its imperfection.
Yeah.
I just saw a bird fly through the transparent panels. This place is so cool.
It really is. And I think another question that's been coming up for me is what can we make space for? Like, if we know what we don't need, what is there now to put into the space or to dismantle, like Abby was saying? What do we need more of? What can we do to make people come?
Fun. Mm-hmm. I think that was very clear in all of our classes. There's a sense of play that we all just wanted to come and have fun. Like, that's the opposite of perfection.
Rest. Yeah. For me, when even when I'm driving on the QEW coming into Mississauga, I feel like a sense of I'm out of the city. So I think this space offers just like a huge weight off your shoulders, just like being in space that I can go like this, like not just here but in Toronto. It doesn't feel like I can go like this. Yeah, place of rest.
So important.
I'm just moving my spine in a way that indicates I'm thinking, but I don't have words yet. But I'm describing it for the audio modality of this podcast. Appreciate that.
I think we need more collaboration over competition. And we've been talking about that a lot, and Mandy and I have been talking about that because it's this idea of we are so, for good reason, very afraid that we don't have the resources we need to do the thing we want to do, whether that's space or money or whatever the scarcity mindset is. But again, when we this whole week again has been just like lifting my head up and looking around and being like, right, it always, for me, comes back to people, and people have skills and experience, and we can give each other our time, and that has value, and we can exchange services and knowledge and that kind of thing. And that's a way of sometimes getting around the money thing. But also there's that sense of like just working with the Fifth has been so wonderful because we have a lot of shared goals, I think, but are doing very different things. And so it's about putting that mindset on of how can we actually support each other rather than all these systems that keep trying to get us to compete with each other. And that's true for dancers as well, because the last time you were in an audition was probably, for me it was a long time ago, but it was always, I had great experiences. They were full of celebration of dancers seeing each other and snapping and being like, you're so great! And then there's just one person at the front of the room who's just like, I'm trying to choose someone. And that's just, it's interesting, right? Because there are so many amazingly talented people. So it's also about celebrating that, even though, and competition sometimes can be a good thing. Andrew was talking about that in one of our discussions because it sort of drives us to get up and take class sometimes. but I think it's interesting. I think that we need both, and we need them to live harmoniously together, the competition and the collaboration, and that it's kind of like we don't want one to win out. We can always have a lot of collaboration, but they kind of keep us on our toes. Having both is in balance somehow. I've been reflecting on that this week.
And thinking too about perfection, it's like something that I'm ruminating on in many aspects of life. Is this thing of like baby steps are okay. Like sometimes the dream is really big and you're like, it has to be perfect before I do it. I have to know all the answers. But that's, first of all, impossible and also horrifying. And also, what are the baby steps you can do? How can you do it imperfectly? Because then through doing, you're going to learn more than you ever would just cycling about it in your head, Clarke.
And I think it's more sustainable that way because it's long term.
Yeah, and then also like, if we're getting more voices or more opportunity, then we are kind of like working towards this dream of abundance where we have options because there's so many contributing voices.
Mic drop. I think, that was so well said. In this notion of collaboration, of connecting with each other, of being in space, how can people who are listening to this and who may know of you connect with each of you further?
They can reach out to me. Just show up in any way, space, or form. Like, I get a lot of people asking me, like, how can I start, like, Filipino dance? I'm, like, 40 years old, and I've never done it, and I don't know anything, and I'm just, like, start anywhere. Like, start by looking at videos, talking to me, talking to anyone, taking a class, going to any other show. Just start anywhere and say something. I don't know.
Is Instagram a good place to
go? You're meaning that literal. Okay.
I'm gonna plug it in the description.
Yeah, Instagram is great.
That was beautiful though.
Well, they can always follow us on Instagram at The Fifth Dance or on our website, thefifth.dance.com. And coming to the studio, you know, the door is always open. Except when it isn't because we're closed. No, just kidding. No, but yes, the door is always open, and I am always on my phone. And reminder that me and the Fifth, and the phone is just me. So it's yeah, you know. So if you call the Fifth, you'll find me. So that's that.
I was listening to the podcast, The 99% Invisible, and they were like, you can find us on Instagram, on all of these different places, but some of those spaces aren't really safe right now. And so I loved that so much. So I will say, in the spirit of like Roman Mars, who's the host of that show, you can find us on Instagram at Frog in Hand. We have a link tree in the link in our bio where you can see all of these cool things that we're doing, and the cool people. So you can connect with Mandy, who's our art shelter coordinator, through our link tree, and Jessica as well, who's our wonderful director of operations. But also you can visit our website, and that's a nice place to check out what we're doing, or our YouTube channel, because it's not, I don't know, I'm trying to think of alternatives to social media as well as the ones that exist.
You can find me on Instagram, usually there.
Yeah, I too can be found on Instagram, probably too much.
Yeah.
And also, hopefully, just like in the dome.
Come find me in the dome.
Come find me in the dome.
Oh my gosh, in person. We have an in-person location. It is near 887 Hydro Road. You can plug in the Lakeview Welcome Center or the Lakeview Discovery Center. And also, I had said before, if you go to the corner of Hydro Road and Rangeview and look for the dome,
You'll see it.
come knock on the door.
Also, Frog in Hand Productions is on Google Maps, and I'm gonna give you a 5-star review.
Drop a review.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Colleen, for connecting us. I'm just filled with gratitude right now.
Shout out to the Art Versations podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you.
officially, I'd love to declare that the art shelter is open!
Thank you so much for listening to the Artversations podcast. Please help the podcast community continue to grow by clicking subscribe or follow on your podcast platform and leave a review. As well, follow the podcast on Instagram at ArtVersationsPod. You'll find photos of the guests you just heard, plus highlights and quotes from each episode. Let's keep the Artversation going. Send in a DM with your thoughts about art and any questions you might have for guests. Special thank you goes out to Jen Marquez and Maxim Bartnowski for their contributions. And thank you, listener. Till next time.